Hi, David Odell here with Odell Complete Concrete. This is our first day on this job site. We're going to be removing this asphalt driveway. We're going to be putting in stamped concrete. It's going to be colored and stamped. We're going to use the Ashlar slate pattern, Silver Smoke by Davis, integral color. Also, we're going to saw cut that concrete off right at the garage door, because we're going to want all a uniform stamp right up to the door. That porch is going to stay. All those bushes are coming out. Here's the saw cutting, so we can remove that concrete without damaging the inside of the garage floor. Putting a little water on that blade out of a sprayer, pump up garden sprayer, just to keep the dust down. Also, we covered a few things in the garage with some plastic. But asphalt, I really enjoy taking out because it's real easy to remove, especially when it's only this thick. When you get into asphalt that's like 6 inches thick and over, it's real difficult to remove because it flexes rather than cracks. But in this case, it's only about 2.5, 2 inches thick, so it just shatters when you touch it. No breaker attachment needed on this one. Here we are, 14,000 pound capacity trailer, dump trailer. All the asphalt's going to get recycled. That's going to go to one specific dump that crushes it, and then they mix it in with the broken concrete, asphalt. It makes a great road base for pavers, for just about anything. It makes a nice base. Because we're going to be widening this driveway all the way to the property line on the right side, and then we're going to take out that deep curve on the left side and just kind of straighten that out a little bit. We'll still have a little radius, but not as severe. That way we can get a 2-car entrance. This ground is really good ground for a concrete base. Actually, it's a sandy loam. It's not an expansive soil at all, so it's a good base. You could actually pour on this native soil without any problem. But I'm going to bring in some base because I'm going to be doing a stamp, and I want a really uniform base so I get a good curing and the concrete dries out all at one time, so I don't have to jump around with my pattern stamps, because that can happen on native soil. There might be a little moisture here or there, and it's drawing water at different rates in different areas. So I'll put a base down on this one. And here's that little 2-foot pop out on the garage. It's pretty tough concrete. It's a 3/4 rock. It's been there a long time, so it's optimal strength right now. But once it cracked, it really came out pretty easily once we got it started. We had some stepping stones because all those bushes came out where they had a raised planter. We're going to pour all the way up to the house. The bushes and the dirt, grass removal, because of the widening, that's going to go into it. I'm going to have a bin drop off here momentarily. Oh, there it is, just arrived. We'll put the hard to dispose of stuff in this because I don't really want to. Typically in this area, we have to drive about, if you really want a good rate on dumping, just some debris that can't be recycled, you got to drive about 2 hours, and that could be a very big problem in a traffic jam. So I get a bin in this situation, and then they can haul it. Here's property line. I just pulled the string line there. That's actually property line, but I gotta allow for about 2-3 inches for my formwork to get in there. 2x4 plus a stake behind it. But I cut it right on that string line so I get a clean edge, you know, minimize the collateral damage. On my initial removal, I'm using the tooth bucket. I have a smooth bucket that I'll end up putting on here to do my fine tuning and detail grading. Here's the road base coming out. Would have been nice to have a grinder on site. I gotta dump that asphalt in and reutilized it, but that's a pretty big operation then. And what I did before I put the base in is I actually graded the subgrade, the native soil. I made that perfectly on the money. That way I get an even lift of the base over the top of it, so we have a good uniform platform to work off when we start placing the concrete. So now all we have to do is saturate it real well, let that water soak in for about 30 minutes. And then we can run the plate compactor over it and it'll be nice and tight. Ready to start forming. Tying some fiberglass reinforcement in there. So we set our line stakes on the inside of face of 2x4 to height. Now we can start setting the 2x4s right there on the property line. Then on the other side we're using some plastic recycled 2x4 material. So within this video you're going to get to see the whole package from beginning to end. That means the entire removal, the setup, the base going in, the pour, the stamping, and the sealing. This was actually a month-long process because we waited for it to cure out to get the sealer on there. Down here at the bottom back of sidewalk we have the expansion foam going on, and we're using some other type of adhesive, spray adhesive that doesn't work that well, and it's that Gorilla adhesive, which is the only one really available now at all the hardware stores, because the good stuff, the 3M, is sold out for some reason. But I was able to find it on Amazon, pretty readily available on there actually. I went ahead and bought a case. Now I have some for future stuff without having to use inferior products. Now because we've widened this driveway and pushed it to the house, and that porch wasn't really designed to step off the other direction, we're going to have to create a new landing or step going out sideways. And that'll all be part of the same pour, so it's going to have that silver smoke in there. But that porch is going to get covered in some outdoor non-slip tile, something in the range of the color we're going with on the driveway. But it's best to let it cure out, the concrete, before you order your tile in these situations. That way you get a nice match, and you can actually throw some tiles out there on the concrete, look at it, compare, and then make the purchase. Setting some screed pins in the middle. You can see them because I painted them orange at the top, so I did that because I didn't want anyone to trip over them, you know, out throughout the night going in and out of the house. Although they have a side entrance, but it's just a little safety feature I threw in there. It's not fun stumbling over a steel stake. Here's the fiberglass reinforcement I was talking about. It's a 3/8 inch diameter. Basically what it is, it's fiberglass throughout the center, and it's covered with an epoxy grip that makes it bond to the concrete when the concrete hits it. Really nice design. So in other words, when you try to break this out in the future, you can't separate the rod from the concrete. It becomes an integral part of the concrete. And it never rusts. That's the other beauty of it. And it's lightweight, so I can probably carry 1,000 bars on my rack on my 3/4 ton pickup without any issues. Here it is. We got them at about 18 inch on centers, both directions. There's your expansion foam. Quickcrete happens to make that item. There's my elevation. I marked that with a permanent pin marker. That way I won't lose the mark through the entire pour. We did some doweling on this porch. Drill and drive technique. 1/2 inch rebar, 1/2 inch hole. Pound them in with an 8-pound sledgehammer, and you can't get them out. Ran some angle bars off all those protruding corners. Hi, we just arrived at the job site. We're getting ready to pour this. Got here this morning and a lot of debris accumulated down at the bottom, which happens a lot of times. And the nice thing about this fiberglass, and I just realized that normally it would take 2 people to hold this up so you could get the debris out from under it. But I can do it by myself in this case. I can lift this whole thing up, take it out, do whatever I want with it. That's the beauty of that deal. Now the concrete's going in here. We've already shot the primer into the wheelbarrow, which is about 5 to 7 gallons of water. Shoot that into the wheelbarrow rather than into the job, and you get it. It dries more consistently. If you try to spread the water over the dirt or concrete over that wet spot, it'll dry a lot slower, and then your stamp's not going to be that uniform when you hit those wet spots. Because we're using a pattern stamp here, the Ashlar slate, it's important on your formwork that you have to plan your formwork, so a starting point. And on our outside form, we made that perfectly square and parallel to the garage floor and house. So we can start right here on the outside edge with our mats, line up with that. We know when we hit the house, it will still be straight. It looks really dark right here, but you'll see at the end when we put the sealer on a month after this cures out how much lighter it got. A really nice color, and the difference between no sealer and having sealer on it. We actually have 2 loads here, and I threw some fiber mesh in the load when they arrived, which I happen to have on my storefront. And what I do is about 1/2 pound to a pound per yard, but you can go up to 3 pounds. Because we're doing 2 loads here, I had both trucks here simultaneously. I just ordered the whole package in one shot. because I didn't want to wait around for a potential cold joint or a big waiting time in between, because when we start stamping, and because it's pattern, I don't want to have to jump around on this slab. I just want to start at one end and go right on through. That's your 4-foot wide wood bull float, hitting it from every direction possible. Because we have all this open space out here in the front, it makes it so much easier. Here's a 5-foot wide Fresno with a rocker arm on it, which is nice because it goes right over the top of those cars. You can adjust the angle on the move. Now we got some funny floats going out, funny trowels. Really, when you're getting ready to stamp something like this, the Ashlar slate stamp, you don't really have to do a lot of knee boarding. You can really just get away with a funny trowel and then just go for it. We're not going to be using a two-tone here. We're just going to be using a liquid clear release to release our mats from the concrete so they don't stick. And I believe I'm just using some mineral spirits on this particular job. Here's the step getting faced and stripped. We won't have to stamp that step because it's going to get covered anyway. But it did have a sag in that corner, I noticed, from the street, so I brought in some concrete and rebuilt that corner up a little bit. Now we noticed that we started right here in the corner. It happens to be the hardest point of the job also, so you kind of always have to start there, but fortunately this forms parallel with the garage and house, so we can measure off those little offsets in the mat and make sure that they're perfectly straight before we start, which we did. We have a roller there just cleaning up the joints here and there as we go. The nice thing about when you're doing a liquid clear release, you can actually see, a lot of times you can use a powder release and you can't really see what's going on until the next day when you rinse. So with the clear liquid, you can actually see what's happening every time you lift the mat. You can really detail all your joints out. So you got clean, no doubles, nothing. Now if you really want to do a two-tone, you could still go through this procedure here, and then you can pick yourself up some liquid water-based stain. You can brush that on there, let it set overnight, wash the excess off because the pigments is carried by the water. It settles in all the nooks and crannies, and then you rinse off the excess. Now you have a two-tone, then you're ready to seal. But we're not going to deal with all that. We're just going to go with a integral, let it patina out and cure for a month, lay some sealer on top of this, and we're going to use a clear lacquer base, wet look, and it really actually modeled out pretty nicely. We do have a little two-tone effect. You'll see that when we seal it. Now from where we started to where we ended, we came up here into the shade, so it worked out really nicely. The first load got stamped last. This particular mix is a 3/8 rock, and it's a 3250 straight cement mix. Here's what you're looking at. Same, we just got off of this with the mats. Turned out real beautiful. Now we're back out here the very next day, early in the morning. We're going to put some control lines in it for cracking purposes. We're going to saw cut it. Because whenever I do a pattern concrete, the last thing you want to see is big joints in it, breaking up your pattern. Because the showpiece here is the actual pattern of the concrete. So we're using a small width control joint here that will kind of disappear because it's smaller width than the actual joints of the pattern. And you'll see when we get the sealer on here and all rinsed up that the control joints don't really take away from the pattern. Nice thing about it also is we lined up the cuts, you know, straight with the pattern, and we hit a few edges of the stones that we stamped in here and there. We went about, these are about 8-foot squares. That's how we broke it up into. Now that we saw cut it and I used the cordless vacuum and the Medusa, there wasn't very little dust left over. No mask needed. Really clean operation. So now that we're all rinsed up, now you can't really see the saw cuts. That's what I like about saw cutting on a pattern especially. There's really no other way to do it. Now if you really want to get tricky on your control joints for your cracking, you could actually follow this stamp pattern exactly and turn it with every stone, and then you'd never know they were there. Not quite as effective as a straight line, but it can still work. This porch is a little bit of on an angle, so it's not perfectly parallel with the joints. Here's what I'm going to be doing. This is a month later, and they have been using this driveway, you know, with the vehicle, so I put a degreaser on it just in case. I don't know what happened in that month, but I definitely don't want like an armor, all oils, things like that on the driveway when I'm getting ready to seal. So I've thrown a degreaser on it and brushed it around, and then pressure washed it. Now that we've pressure washed it, scrubbed it with a degreaser, now I'm going to go over it with just with a water hose. So I want to make sure I get any residue of the soap off. Now that'll dry overnight. We'll let that dry overnight to make sure it's 100% dry before we throw the sealer on it. So now we're just blowing off any leaves that accumulated overnight, and now she's ready to seal. Using a glazing seal here, and it's a wet look lacquer base. I did use 7 gallons of the sealer, and I diluted it with 2 gallons of acetone. So we did a total of 7 gallons on this driveway. We did 3 coats on it. Each coat we waited about 15 minutes in between. The acetone helps kick it off a little bit so you can get out there and put your second coats on there right away. Also helps it spray more uniformly. Now you can see the modeling, even though this isn't really a two-tone, you can see the different colors in it just because of the way the mats and texture hits it. So that's what you want it to look like when it's all said and done. Now this sealer with the 3 coats, probably 7 years in between resealing on this. And then if you drip some oil on it with a car or whatever, it should wipe right off. And by the way, the winner for the DeWalt pressure washer is Marcos Gutierrez. Anyway, thank you for watching. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. hit the notification button so you're notified when the next video goes up. Thank you. Have a good one.